$30 million in assets. To find out why, I spoke with Knight Frank's residential boss, Lord Andrew Hay, and started by asking exactly what classifies an ultra-high net worth individual.
Well, I think we like to try and classify the ultra-high net worth as someone who has the ability to spend 30 million or more. Now, clearly, some of them could be centra-millionaires or indeed billionaires, but it's really $30 million plus that we look at.
Well, I have to say that pretty much matches my idea of ultra-high net worth as well. Now, tell me, these individuals in your report are increasing across the globe?
Yes, at the rate of over 8,000 a year, new ultra-high net worths are being created. And even just in China, there's over 101,000 millionaires being created every year. Within Asia-Pacific in particular, a huge growth. And we're anticipating 42% growth over the next 10 years.
Investments of the ultra-high net worth individuals, picking a country obviously is very important to them. It's how they make their money as well. What would attract them to Australia? And are these individuals put off by what could almost be called an unstable government?
I mean, I think it's fascinating. If you look back 5 years, Australia was sort of on the radar, but for the ultra high net worths, they had a choice across many countries. Two things have changed. Number one, well, three perhaps. One is that there's been a continued growth of high net worth. Secondly, the number of options open to them globally has perhaps shrunk because of various political and economic events. But thirdly, both Melbourne and Sydney have risen up through the rankings, and in our tracking of the 100 most important cities around the world now, Sydney stands at 11th and Melbourne at 20th, and 5 years ago they wouldn't have been in the top 20, and we predict that Sydney will go further up the list in the next couple of years.
What accounts for their attraction to Sydney and Melbourne? What is attractive to them?
Well, a range of things. I mean, there's the very obvious things like education, lifestyle, quality of life, and also the quality of the stock that's available to them. But now there are more subtle things, I think, in terms of economic and political scenarios around the world which make Australia more attractive. And this whole drive by governments for transparency means that increasingly high net worths are being attracted to areas where there is a strong legal system, there's a strong banking system, and actually things are well organised. And it's in those jurisdictions that I think the high net worths are becoming more comfortable, and indeed the banks are more prepared to lend against investments, as generally across the world banks are looking for a more orderly state of affairs.
So Australia is seen as a safe haven?
It's always been seen as a safe haven and also a very attractive place, but also I think its connectivity is increasing. And as I'm sure you're aware, there is now great talk and hope that in the next year there will be non-stop long-distance flights for a number of places around the world, which again will make Australia come much more within the reach of the high net worths. And it is this connectivity which really drives value.
That raises an interesting point, talking about connectivity. These investors, are they likely to actually come out and live in these properties, or are they not just really banks, land banks?
Oh, no, I think increasingly what's happening is people may have a portfolio of 2, 3, 4, maybe half a dozen properties around the world, but they're much more mobile now. So yes, they will stay in them frequently during the course of the year, maybe not for 3 or 4 months at a time, but for several weeks at a time, and then move round. So I don't anticipate that there are many that will be left standing empty.
Well, we've talked about what attracts investors. What would be the trigger, alternately, to make investors sell property, expensive property?
Well, I think, people do sell them. Sometimes people simply see a capital gain and then they will dispose of the asset and take their property. But I think increasingly in the last decade it was all very much about wealth generation. And some of that did cause investors to sell on their properties. I think since the GFC, looking forwards now, we see the next 10 years very much as wealth preservation. And that is really, I think, bringing money perhaps which has been offshore back onshore, and then actually holding the asset because it is a secure environment, and they're looking for wealth preservation. So I think that churn is probably going to decrease.
Exciting. How does Australia's high-end property rate compare to the rest of the world? Are we seen as inexpensive?
Well, I've been talking about that quite a lot recently, and it may seem slightly controversial locally, but I think within a global, well, it's a fact, within a global context, both Melbourne and Sydney look to me to be very good value. They're sort of priced mid-range, but the quality of the product that you can find here, and obviously the quality of life, I think it looks really good value in a global context. But equally, I know that locally people may perceive the market to have risen a lot, and it could look quite hot. And are we in a bubble? The answer is I don't think we are. I think there is. I think there's quite a lot of growth left in the market.
So you don't foresee any sort of crash coming into the Sydney or Melbourne markets?
No, I don't. But equally, there is always, like with all developing markets, there's the question of affordability. For people coming into the property world for the first time, affordability is a big issue for a number of cities, and how governments address that is a really important point.
With this increase in the Sydney and Melbourne, in those markets, in the ultra-high net worth individual market, does Knight Frank look upon it as a growing market? Will you be increasing your market presence?
We most certainly will be increasing our market presence, absolutely. I mean, we see them as being incredibly important global markets, as I said earlier, rising up, through the ranks in terms of popularity. And we are a luxury brand that specialises in marketing to high net worth. So, projects like One Queensbridge in Melbourne have a global appeal, and we are absolutely increasing the size of our teams and our strengths and connecting them to our global network. It's a really important opportunity for us.
It has been an absolute delight speaking with you, Lord Hay. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you for yours. Thank you very much indeed.